Hey everyone, ready to dive into something a little different.
We're talking Wardley mapping today.
And trust me,
This isn't just another business buzzword.
we're going deep on how this tool can add a whole new dimension to your strategic thinking.
And to help us navigate the ins and outs of Wardley mapping.
I've got an expert guide joining me.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to break this down.
Let's face it, the business world can feel like a chaotic chess game sometimes, right?
Oh, tell me about it.
You're so focused on your next move.
You missed the bigger picture.
It's so easy to get caught up in the weeds.
That's where Wardley mapping comes in.
We're using excerpts from the Wardley Mapping Book of Knowledge.
To unpack how to see the whole board.
Anticipate your opponent's move
Totally.
to win.
Love that analogy.
Okay.
So, before we even get to the how,
I'm curious about the why.
what's the big problem Wardley mapping is trying to solve?
It's all about situational awareness,
Or,
the lack of it.
okay, Kiwar.
We get so caught up in the day-to-day whirlwind,
Yeah.
the what needs to be done, how to do it, and when.
That we completely lose sight of the why behind our actions.
It's like we forget where we're even going.
Exactly. We lose sight of where those actions fit into the larger landscape.
It's like trying to navigate a maze while wearing blinders.
You nailed it.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. It's not enough to just go through the motions.
We need to understand the context, the bigger picture, right?
Precisely. And this isn't just a problem for startups finding their footing.
Oh.
The book tells this great anecdote about a seasoned executive, someone you'd think would have it all figured out.
Let's hear it.
Turns out, they were essentially winging it. It really highlights how pervasive this lack of clear strategic mapping is, even at the highest levels.
That's a little unsettling, honestly. So how does Wardley mapping help us overcome this lack of awareness?
Give us the crash course version,
Imagine a map.
but not just one that shows you where things are right now.
This one shows you how they've evolved over time and where they're heading in the future.
Okay, kind of like those historical maps they show in movies.
Yes. That's essentially what a Wardley map does for your business.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Walk us through the basics. What does this map look like?
And how do we even begin to create one?
It all starts with the core user need.
You could call it the North Star of your business.
This isn't about your product or service.
But the underlying need it fulfills for your customer. Think of it as the checkmate you're aiming for in our strategic chess game.
So if you're a company like, say, Spotify.
The user need isn't just music streaming.
Yeah.
It's something more fundamental.
Like easy access to a vast library of music.
Exactly. You've got to dig deeper to uncover that core desire driving your customer.
Once you have that.
You can start mapping out the value chain.
All right, what is that?
It's all the components, activities, and resources needed to satisfy that need.
So for Spotify, that would be everything from music licensing deals and data storage to algorithm development and user interface design, right?
You got it.
Basically, all the pieces of the puzzle that go into delivering that seamless music experience. You're getting it. But here's where it gets really interesting and where the predictive power of Wardley maps comes into play.
Hold on. Predictive power. You're going to have to explain that one.
Don't leave me hanging. Are you saying a Wardley map can help us anticipate the future?
Let's just say understanding this evolutionary axis is key to not only surviving disruption, but potentially even capitalizing on it.
But that, my friend, is a conversation for part 2.
You're killing me. All right, listeners, you heard the man. We're diving into the fascinating world of climatic patterns and how to spot them in part 2. All right, we're back.
And you know, I'm itching to talk about this predictive power you teased.
Well, let's dive right in.
So let's talk about those climatic patterns.
It sounds a little mystical for a business strategy tool, doesn't it?
It might sound that way.
But it's actually quite grounded. Think of it like this.
We can't predict the exact weather months in advance.
But we know summer is generally hotter than winter.
Okay, I'm seeing the analogy.
But how does that apply to the business world?
Where it feels like anything can change overnight.
Because even amidst the chaos,
They're repeating patterns in how industries evolve
how technologies mature,
and how competitive landscapes shift.
so there are patterns.
Yes, and Wardley mapping helps us recognize these patterns
These climatic shifts, if you will.
so we can anticipate
Yeah.
and maybe even get ahead of the curve.
So you're saying there's a certain predictability to how things evolve in the business world.
Exactly.
And one of the most common patterns is the journey from genesis to commodity.
Okay, right.
Remember how we talked about mapping components along that evolutionary axis?
Yeah.
Well, by observing how other products or services have transitioned along that axis in the past.
I can start to anticipate where things might be heading in our own industries.
Give me an example. How can we see this genesis to commodity pattern playing out in the real world?
Think about digital photography.
It wasn't that long ago that digital cameras were clunky,
Expensive gadgets,
reserved for professionals or serious hobbyists. That was their genesis.
a time of novelty and custom-built solutions.
And now every smartphone has a high-quality digital camera built in. Talk about a commodity.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that Kodak
A giant in the photography world.
completely missed this shift.
Really?
They were so blinded by their success with film
Their legacy component?
that they failed to recognize the disruptive potential of digital. They were stuck in yesterday's climate.
That's a cautionary tale if I've ever heard one. So
Understanding these patterns
seeing those climatic shifts.
is essential for not just surviving, but thriving in the long run.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about individual products becoming commodities. Entire industries can undergo these transformations.
Like what?
Look at the shift from traditional
On-premise IT infrastructure.
to cloud computing.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going with this.
Cloud computing was once seen as this niche.
Almost fringe technology.
Now it's practically essential for businesses of all sizes.
Precisely.
Companies that understood this pattern
Who saw the inevitability of cloud computing becoming a commodity.
were able to gain a significant advantage. They weren't caught off guard.
They were ready to capitalize on the shift.
This is blowing my mind.
But understanding patterns is one thing. How do we actually use them to make decisions?
Is there a framework?
A set of guiding principles.
That's where doctrine comes in.
Doctrine, okay.
Think of it as your strategic playbook.
Offering guiding principles for navigating the complexities revealed by your Wardley map.
And one of the most important is removing bias and duplication.
I have a feeling that's something a lot of businesses struggle with.
You would be surprised.
Yeah.
Large
That's
organizations
particular.
tend to accumulate redundancies and inefficiencies over time. Mapping helps shine a light on these.
Pushing you to streamline and optimize. It's
Well,
less clutter.
More clarity.
Exactly.
And another key principle is to think fire.
Which stands for
Inexpensive and elegant.
Think fire.
All right, you've got to elaborate on that one.
It's all about breaking down those massive,
Intimidating projects,
just smaller.
allowing you to adapt and iterate more effectively.
So instead of placing all your bets on one big idea,
You're testing out multiple smaller approaches simultaneously.
you got it. Think of it as building a fleet of nimble X-Wings instead of one giant Death Star.
Okay, now you're just speaking my language.
I'm sold on Think Fire. What else is in this strategic playbook?
One of the most critical principles is to establish a systematic mechanism of learning.
What does that mean exactly?
Essentially, it's about constantly measuring outcomes
Gathering data.
and using that feedback to refine your approach. You can't just set a course and hope for the best.
You need to constantly adjust your sails based on the winds of change. So Wardley mapping isn't a one-time exercise.
It's an ongoing process of observation.
Nice. Precisely. But just like in chess,
There are common pitfalls.
those tempting but misleading paths that can lead to strategic defeat.
Like what?
We call these lies.
Lies. You've got my attention. What kind of lies are we talking about here?
One of the most pervasive is the belief that execution matters more than strategy.
But isn't execution everything?
I mean, a great strategy poorly executed is useless, right?
True.
But a flawless execution of the wrong strategy won't get you very far either. It's like
Yeah.
meticulously crafting the perfect set of wheels.
Well, what you really need is a boat. Wardley mapping helps you determine whether you're building wheels or boats before you invest all that effort.
Okay, point taken. What other lies should we be wary of?
Another common one is the allure of first mover advantage.
Right, everyone wants to be first.
We often assume that being first to market is the key to success,
But that's not always the case.
especially if you haven't considered the evolving landscape.
Yeah.
It's not just about being first.
It's about being first to truly understand and capitalize on the opportunity.
Exactly.
Rushing in blindly can backfire.
Especially in a rapidly changing market. Remember,
It's not just about speed.
but about strategic direction.
This is all incredibly insightful.
But I have to ask,
What about the things we can't predict?
even with the best maps and the sharpest strategic minds,
There will always be surprises.
that's where the true power of embracing uncertainty comes in.
Okay.
Wardley mapping isn't about eliminating uncertainty.
It's about equipping ourselves to navigate it effectively.
And how do we do that?
And for that,
We need to delve into the story of a company called Fotango. and their remarkable pivot.
But we'll save that fascinating tale for part 3.
You're killing me with these cliffhangers. All right, listeners, you heard the man. We're diving into the story of Fatango and the art of embracing uncertainty when we come back. All right, we're back, and I'm ready to hear all about this company, Fatango.
Ah, yes. Fotango.
You were saying they're a prime example of embracing uncertainty.
Indeed.
That's a pretty brave move in the business world.
Well, it's not just about being brave.
Okay, then what is it about?
It's about understanding that in a constantly evolving landscape, clinging to rigid plans,
It can be riskier than adapting to change.
so flexibility is key.
You could say that. Fatango's story is a perfect example of how mapping can guide you toward a bold pivot when the landscape shifts.
Okay, so set the scene for us. What was Fatango's original game plan?
And what made them change course?
They started as an online photo service?
Sounds familiar. Like Kodak.
You got it.
Were they about to get blindsided by the rise of online photo sharing too?
But here's the difference.
What happened?
Fatango, armed with a Wardley map, saw the climatic shift coming.
So they saw the writing on the wall?
They recognized that online photo storage was rapidly becoming a commodity, and they weren't content to be left behind.
Smart. So what did they do?
They made a daring decision.
Yeah.
They pivoted their entire business model.
Wow, that's a
Oh.
big move.
They shifted away from being a consumer-facing photo service to become a provider of the underlying platform for other companies.
So instead of trying to compete in an increasingly commoditized market, they leveraged their understanding of the evolving landscape to carve out a whole new niche.
Exactly. It was a brilliant strategic move.
But even with their foresight,
Success wasn't guaranteed.
really,
The book emphasizes that Fatango's pivot wasn't about finding a magical right answer.
okay,
It was about expanding their possibilities
embracing the uncertainty of the market.
and giving themselves a fighting chance in a rapidly changing world.
That's a powerful lesson. Even with the best maps and the most thorough analysis.
There's always an element of the unknown.
And that's okay. In fact, that's where the real magic happens.
It's about finding that balance between strategic thinking and adaptability, between planning for the future and embracing the unknown.
This has been a phenomenal deep dive. Thank you so much for walking us through the intricacies of Wardley mapping and sharing such insightful examples.
It's been my pleasure. I hope our listeners are inspired to explore this for themselves.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you a powerful new lens for viewing the strategic landscape. Remember, the future may be uncertain, but with the right tools and a healthy dose of curiosity, you can navigate the unknown and maybe even come out ahead. Until next time, keep exploring.